Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's session of the Green Saving Smart panel. My name is Rachel Goldstein, and I am the program director for the Financial Futures program at CVOEO. Our program provides a variety of services to low to moderate income Vermonters who are interested in improving their financial situations. This is including one-on-one coaching sessions, classes, and informational panels like we're hosting this morning. As I mentioned before, this is being recorded, so we invite you to keep your video on because we enjoy seeing your faces, but if you'd like to turn your camera off, that's perfectly fine as well. We plan to reserve, well, we've prepared quite a few questions for our panelists, but we plan to reserve the last 30 minutes for your questions. So if something comes up that you just don't want to wait, feel free to put it in the chat and we'll try to address it in real time, but otherwise we ask that you wait till the last 30 minutes and we'll invite your questions, at which point you can unmute yourself and speak with our panelists. Co-hosting today is Jen Myers. She's our financial energy coach with the Green Saving Smart program. And Jen, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Great, thank you, Rachel. Yes, as Rachel said, I'm one of, at the moment, 4 coaches with Green Saving Smart. And our website is greensavingsmart.org if you want any more information about that. Our program continues the financial coaching that is in many of the community action agencies' financial futures programs or community economic development programs, but with a lens for helping people to reduce their energy budgets or reduce their dependence on fossil fuels. So that's how we look at helping people to budget, save, and make some financial goals. And there are 3 other coaches on this webinar today, so I'm happy to have them here. And what I want to do first is to let the panelists, our 4 panelists, introduce themselves. And I will, because we're not in any order, I will go ahead and ask them singly to introduce themselves. So let's start with John Copens, who is the Executive Director of Old Spokes Home.
Hey folks, thank you so much for hosting this event, CVOEO. We're excited to be talking about transportation and the various alternatives that can save folks money on their mobility needs. So I'm the relatively new executive director here at Old Spokes Home. I've been here since February of this year, and Old Spokes Home is a nonprofit bike shop in Burlington's Old North End. We believe passionately in the power of the bicycle to transform communities and to transform lives, individual lives. We see the bike as a simple solution to a set of complex problems. And so a lot of our work here at Old Spokes Home is really committed to creating great access and more access to great bikes because we see them as transformative objects. So really excited to be on this panel, to listen and learn from others and to take part. Look forward to participating. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Next, we could hear from Jamie Smith, who is the Director of Marketing and Planning for Green Mountain Transit.
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be with you today. I have been with Green Mountain Transit for about 14 years, so I have lots of knowledge about public transportation in our communities that we serve. You might be familiar with our buses as they travel around in your communities, but we do a lot of sort of behind the scenes transportation as well. So I'm excited to talk about that today. We have partnered with Old Spokes Home on some projects, and we partner with CarShare on some things. So I'm amongst fantastic panelists today and happy to be with you all.
Great, thank you. Next, I'd like to have Alicia Taylor introduce herself. She is the Director of Community Engagement for CarShare Vermont.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. So nice to be here. Thanks for having me. So again, I work for CarShare Vermont, and we are a nonprofit organization based here in Burlington. Our mission really is to provide affordable, convenient, reliable alternative to car ownership. So we're about helping people get around without the need to own a car, but still having that access to transportation that's so critical to meet basic needs. So excited to be here, and definitely love the connections with GMT and Old Spokes and all the other organizations offering transportation services, because we're part of the piece of the puzzle. So thanks for having us.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
And Samantha Hurt is the program manager for Mileage Smart.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for hosting this. I'm excited to be here. So I am the program manager for Mileage Smart, which is a statewide incentive program to help folks purchase used EVs and hybrids. And this program was created back in, 2020. So we're just, coming out of a pilot year, just getting started. And the idea of this program was to fill the gap where, there are folks who might have access to the new EV rebates, but a lot of folks don't. And the unfortunate truth in Vermont is, for a lot of folks, you really need a car to get around. Obviously, there are wonderful organizations here who are creating kind of a patchwork puzzle piece to help folks get around. And we need to see more of that. So I'm excited to have this conversation and learn more.
Great, thank you.
I guess
Rachel, do you have a?
I can get us started. Thanks for
Okay.
those introductions.
Thank you.
And so we're going to start with some very basic questions just to warm you all up. But the first question I'd like to pose to our panelists is, why should I consider using your program? And maybe we can just popcorn style it if people are comfortable with that. Or to maybe rephrase that, why do you love your program? And why would others love your program? And I know some of you offer many programs.
I'm happy to take a crack at that.
Thank you.
I've said it already. We believe pretty passionately in the bicycle as sometimes I use the word magical object. The basic design of the bike has not changed in like 130 years. And there's a reason for that. It's so well suited to the human. It is so efficient. When you think about the efficiency of covering miles, and the fuel input required to cover distance, there really is nothing more efficient than the bike. And that's both from an energy standpoint and from a dollar standpoint. At Old Spokes Home, we have a program called the Everybody Bikes program. We sell bikes through that program. Bikes are as inexpensive as $50. Folks can experience sort of incentives up to $200 on our newer bikes and our sort of retail bikes. And then we have a whole rack of bikes special for the Everybody Bikes program. So if you think about it, $200 or $300 max for a really great functioning bike that's going to last you 5 to 10 years. Annual cost for that bike, maybe there's a tune-up, maybe there's some maintenance or tires, maybe it's $100 a year. And you can get, what do you get out of that bike? You get distance traveled in terms of whether that's for fun or to get places or some combination of the two. And then the independence that comes from being able to go when you want, where you want, and to do that under your own power. The other thing we do here at Old Spokes Home is we really want to make bike maintenance and fixing bikes accessible as well. So we have programs around that because we find that that's also an obstacle for some folks. Folks want to know that if they get a flat tire on their bike, they're going to be able to take care of that on their own, or they want that self-sufficiency of working on a bicycle on their own. And the wonderful thing about a bike is it is really accessible from a mechanical standpoint. Personally, I am very reticent to take on any home improvement projects. I'm not a particularly handy person. I definitely never get under the hood of my car, but a bike is something that I find manageable, something that I can work on. And we find that that's, a few workshops of an hour or two, and someone is pretty adept at working on a bike. And so you think about the economy of a relatively inexpensive object, and then the ability to fix it yourself. And that is, those ingredients really add up to self-sufficiency, and they add up to joy of just getting out there and riding. We have no illusions that the bike is the only solution when you've got families, when you're shopping. The reality is the bike is one tool in the tool belt for a lot of folks. I don't want to sort of pretend that it's simple to simply adopt a bike and have that be the only option. On the other hand, we do see that it can really displace other trips, and it's a really economical and fun way to get around. And for some folks, it is really their sole source of transportation, whether that's getting to work, getting to appointments. It's amazing what you can do on a bike. And we have customers every day who are really using it as a primary source of transportation. So.
Thanks for sharing, John. I can attest, I went to one of John's workshops and feel so much more confident with my bike now. I hope that I don't get a flat, but if and when I do, I feel like I'll know what to do. So I appreciate that. When you mentioned the ease of travel and freedom to go where you want to go, when you want to go, it made me think of the car share program. And Alicia, I wasn't sure if you want to follow up with that.
Yeah, I was actually gonna jump in because I feel like I love everything John was just talking about, and really, most of our members, the people that we serve that use our vehicles, they walk, they bike, they take the bus most often, and then they're using car share for those trips that they really need access to a car for, like grocery shopping, doctor's appointments, those social trips to go visit family out of town, those kinds of things that you really need a car. And what I love is that, we also feel like it can be transformative. We serve a lot of our members that haven't had access to car transportation for years, and the independence that it brings to be able to book a car to go visit that family member that lives outside of a bus line or in a different state, and to be able to have that independence to travel on your own schedule, but not take on the financial burden of ownership, which for many people is too much to actually own a car and deal with the maintenance and repairs and kind of insurance and all of that. So with car share, you're getting access to use a car for the time you need it, pay for that use, but not have to deal with kind of all of the other pieces that come with a car ownership. So that's what I love about it. I personally, we've been car free as a family for a couple years now, and we love our bikes from Old Spokes home, and we can walk and take the bus most places, and when we need that car, we can still use it and have access to it. So that's what I really love about it, is that it kind of allows people to the freedom and independence and convenience of a car without the huge financial cost of it. So yeah.
Well, thank you both for sharing. Jamie or Samantha, if you'd like to chime in, feel free.
Yeah, no, I'd love to chime in and talk a little bit about Green Mountain Transit. So we provide transportation all the way from Northwest Vermont, Franklin, Grand Isle County, down to Central Vermont. We have service, fixed route service. Like I said, you're probably familiar seeing buses in your community, but we offer a lot of sort of behind the scenes things. We have volunteer driver networks that help get people to critical medical appointments. We have elderly and disabled programs where folks are able to take free transportation to and from community centers. Folks who wouldn't otherwise have access to transportation get to go out and be social and participate in programs and have access to those sort of critical services. Right now, as Connie mentioned in the chat, all of our bus service is free. So it's a really amazing time to check out the bus system and see if it works for you. As Alicia said, you know, combining options, combining biking and car share and busing is amazing. Some folks don't want to take the bus into Burlington because they're like, what happens if I get stuck, or if I have an emergency, or if I have to do something? That's where, you know, biking and car share come into play. When we do have a fair, we partner with car share to provide some free transportation passes. So new car share members do at least get some passes to use the bus. So that's an option to try that multimodal commute. You know, we love bikes. It's hard sometimes with large vehicles and bicyclists, but I do feel like, you know, as an organization, we certainly embrace that. And yeah, so, you know, I'm happy to talk more if people have, you know, specific things later that they want to talk about, but in terms of busing, you know, having critical access. Unfortunately, the thing about designing bus transportation is in order to keep it efficient and effective, it sort of has to be linear, right? So people live off of the regular fixed bus service. What are the ways that we can kind of combat that? This multimodal option is one. Another option is similar to what we're doing in Montpelier right now, which is an on-demand transportation system. It's sort of Uber for public transportation. Folks can use their app or call GMT, schedule a ride on when it works for them on their schedule. And there's a 12.5-mile service radius that covers all of downtown Montpelier into Berlin and some parts of Barrie. So folks can really get around in a way that's more convenient for them and more convenient than a traditional fixed route service. And that program is expanding throughout the state. The state of Vermont just did 14 feasibility studies in different parts of the state to see if models like the MyRide service in Montpelier would be effective everywhere else. And, you know, we are partnering Mileage Smart is part of Capstone. We're working with Capstone on a really exciting new program called Mobility for All, which is using Capstone vehicles and drivers to provide some on-demand services in and around the central Vermont area. So that that program is coming hopefully in FY23 in this current fiscal year. So yeah, thanks for listening.
All right, I can just jump in after Jamie. So as I mentioned, Mileage Smart is really here to bridge the gap for a lot of folks. And these are a lot of folks who really wish that they had access to a bus or they lived in a place where they could bike to, you know, get to A to B. You know, they have families, they work third and fourth shift. They just can't really make it work without a car. And this program is for folks who, let's say, you know, they have to get their kid to daycare before they go to work in the morning and their car breaks down. Our program is structured in a way where they can apply in the morning and at the end of the day, they can leave a dealership with a car. And it's not just any car, you know, without Mileage Smart, these folks would likely get another, you know, $500, $1,000 car that might not even make it another year. But with this program, we can ensure that we're getting them into a vehicle that isn't going to cost as much to repair, and it's going to last them and it's going to take them to where they need to be much longer, and it's much more reliable. Another thing I love about this program is when people come in, oftentimes they have no idea what a hybrid or an electric vehicle is. There's a huge education component when people just sign up and they get emails from us and, you know, they call me and they have questions. So as they're learning more about what it means to drive a greener car, it's opening the door to them further down the road to continue making more steps to be energy efficient. Another great thing about hybrids and EVs is if someone needs a loan for that vehicle, they are eligible for a discounted rate on that loan. And a big piece of of our work at Mileage Smart and also at Capstone is we want to help lift people out of poverty. We want to help put them in a situation where they can be stronger and stronger and stronger and more independent. And Mileage Smart is a huge piece of that, helping folks get into a loan where they're able to make consistent payments. And obviously that's something that Financial Futures is really invested in as well. And that's what I love. People a year ago, they're reaching out to me and, you know, they have had such an incredible experience with their car, and it has helped them move forward on their energy efficiency. People start thinking about what are the ways that I can leave the car at home? Maybe they don't have access to car share, but they start to carpool. And then when they carpool with their hybrid or electric vehicle, then their friend gets to see, hey, this is a pretty cool car too. Maybe I would be interested in moving into something like that. So while on paper we are an incentive program, we do offer people money for that vehicle. I think the biggest piece of this is the education and the little touches. As it spreads throughout the state, people are telling their friends about it, and it's helping people learn more about what it means to electrify and reduce emissions. And that's something I'd be happy to talk more about later on in this.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for that. When you talk about education, I agree that I think that's a very important component of trying to get people to use less fossil fuel, save money on transportation. I'm wondering if you each could speak about some incentives that you offer. I know Vermont has several incentives right now to get people to switch to electric. Also, what incentives do you offer to low income households that maybe people don't know about, or as a way to have everybody in on the green transportation revolution?
I can speak to that unless you want to go, Samantha. To jump on the EV.
It's all you.
Okay, I'll be quick. So for us, we offer our mobility share rate plan offers a free membership to income eligible households. So basically, if anyone is signed up for 3 Squares Vermont or lives in affordable housing like Burlington Housing or Champlain Housing Trust, Cathedral Square, automatically eligible for a free annual membership that is kind of an ongoing renewable membership. And also that rate plan has discounted driving rates. So it offers the lowest driving rates fleet wide on all of our vehicles. So that's a plan that we're, trying to promote more widely. We've seen it like quadruple in the last year in terms of the number of households that we're serving. But we are, I didn't mention before, we have a fleet of 22 vehicles that are all within Burlington. So really our service works best for households that live within Burlington or the greater Burlington area that can easily access our cars. But for those, for those households, we are just trying to kind of continue to grow that program. We'd love to serve even more people. So that's kind of what we've had this program since 2012, and we've kind of just continued to see it grow, especially during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, and then kind of putting a lot of energy in partnering with affordable housing developments to locate vehicles on site, electric vehicles as well. So, we've expanded our electric vehicles, and we're just kind of continuing to do that and try to spread the word about that program. So we welcome, please let people know that the mobility share program is kind of an ongoing thing that we're offering, and we'd love to spread the word about it.
I'm happy to talk about public transportation here for a second. As I mentioned before, we offer transportation to folks who are part of our Elders and Disabled program, the Medicaid program. Those are all subsidized programs for folks to take transportation to and from either shopping or critical medical appointments. So that's, one way that we provide, transportation to those folks. We are currently fare free, as I mentioned, but that doesn't mean that we'll be fare free forever. And we have recognized that in the conversation about bringing fares back into our system, we do have to think about what does an income eligible, income eligibility program look like for us. Right now, we do offer discounts, but it's based on age. Typically, folks under 16 or over 60 receive discounted fares, but we recognize that that's not the only way that we should be, measuring how folks need to get around and how a discount would be beneficial. Some other ways that we offer incentives is through business participation. So folks who have employees who need to get to and from work who don't have access to a car or other means of transportation, we do offer some significant discounts to businesses who subsidize transportation for their employees. So if folks work for organizations that might be interested in that type of program, GMT is happy to work with folks on what that might look like and come up with transportation solutions to help folks get to and from their place of business.
Yeah, and I talked about this a little bit already, but our Everybody Bikes program is really our key bike access program. We provide essentially 50% off any bike under $400. We have a special rack of bikes for the Everybody Bikes program where often folks can get those bikes for somewhere around 50 or 150, between 50 and 150, once that 50% off is applied. We also provide 50% off of repairs for folks who qualify for the Everybody Bikes program, and 35% off of accessories as well. And in terms of qualifying for the Everybody Bikes program, we really try to keep it pretty informal. And eligible folks are those who already qualify for another government program or who are referred from many of our community partners. And then finally, we have a third category of eligibility, which is simply that someone comes in and really says they need it and sort of asserts that they should qualify. So we want to be sure the Everybody Bikes program is accessible for anyone for whom it really can serve them. And then similarly with our workshops, we tend to make those free or minimal costs for those who participate in the Everybody Bikes program as well. I would also be remiss, I know this isn't really focused on it, but kids need mobility too. And one of our partners said about bikes in the Old North End of Burlington that they're gold for kids in the Old North End. We have youth shop that happens both Tuesdays and Thursdays here at our shop, and we give away a lot of bikes to kids like age 8 to 18 as part of that. And those bikes get ridden. They get ridden a lot, and then they bring them back for free repairs as part of youth shop. That happens 3:30 to 5:30 every Tuesday and Thursday here at Old Spokes Home as well.
That sounds great. And Samantha, I know you have some incentives too.
Yes, there are quite a few incentives for vehicles in Vermont. So I'll just start with Mileage Smart. Mileage Smart offers a 25% incentive towards any used electric vehicle and qualifying hybrids. And it's 25% of the initial sale price up to $5,000. So any vehicle that's $20,000 or over would be capped at a $5,000 incentive. And in order to qualify for the program, we recognize that there are so many programs in the state that for a lot of low-income Vermonters, it's a huge barrier to continue to apply and provide a ton of information, and it's personal information. So we didn't want to create a new barrier. So the biggest piece is income And in order to qualify, one would have to be at 80% state median income or below. And we take that on an honor. So people report their income and we take it at face value. So we do have a caveat that the program is likely going to be audited at some time by the state. That has not yet happened. It will down the road. So we just ask folks to provide the most accurate information as they can. And we also recognize that as time goes on, prices of cars are only going up. I did a little internal number crunching last year to look at all of the cars that went through the system in the end of 2020. And at 1 year after they had already been sold, their market value had gone up. Cars are not depreciating and it's hitting people's pockets. So something that's in the works right now, it has not been hammered out, but we are hoping to get a second system for delivering the incentive for the lowest income Vermonters to give them a flat $5,000 rather than a percentage of the vehicle. So we don't have a timeline on that yet, but we're really hoping to be able to get something like that for folks, because most of these folks, they can't get a loan and they're just trying to pull money together. So that's Mileage Smart. And then of course there is the new EV rebates. There's a state and federal rebate for new EVs. I'm not going to pretend to know a ton about that program. But I would suggest is if you would like more information about that program to go to driveelectricvermont.com. That is an incredible website that has just an amazing, it's plethora of knowledge there. So that's for new EVs. And then there are rebates through electric utility companies. I want to say that there is one for almost every single utility company, and it does vary. So it's for plug-in hybrids and all electric vehicles. They offer a percentage on chargers as well as money towards purchasing the vehicle. And I want to say most of them have an additional rebate for low-income Vermonters as well. And there are, I think that there's going to be a question about this later on, but there are also rebates for employers. If employers want to install chargers at offices, there's rebates for them to do so, which is huge for folks who want an EV, but they can't afford to charge at home or they don't have a public charger on their route.
Great, thank you. Thank you for hitting all of that.
Yes, thank you. And not just for sharing, but for making these programs so accessible to so many Vermonters, because it's really incredible the creativity that goes into some of these incentive programs. So thank you for sharing. Many of you have already touched on this next question, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about how your programs can complement each other. If biking works with buses or Mileage Smart with car share. Any takers for this? John, you'd like to jump in?
You know, every day I wake up in Montpelier, I hop on my bike, I ride that bike downtown, and then I hop on one of GMT's buses, head up to Burlington, get off up at the hospital, and then bike down to the shop. And like the convenience of multimodal, we're saying that word a lot, but like, you know, the reality is there's often some distance to cover to access a bus. And when you can walk that distance or you can bike that distance, it just adds some efficiency and a little bit of pleasure to the day. So we definitely see that as a real, you know, bikes do mix nicely, and it's fabulous, honestly, that there are bike racks on every single bus. That's a huge investment and really important, an important piece of the puzzle. So, and you know, similarly, for those, you know, I just looked up, AAA always does this annual estimate of car costs, and it's for a new vehicle, it's something like $10,000 annually. I think we all would probably say that underestimates things, especially with current gas prices. We all know what an incidental cost, like a repair, right? I think those of us who own cars, it can be, when you get that call from a mechanic saying, oh, sorry, new brakes, you know, $1,500. That's like that for so many households, that kind of news can just be crushing. So trying to liberate folks from car ownership, I think is a key strategy for those who can do without a car from a financial standpoint. And so it's like piecing together a puzzle. If you're going to try to do without a car, or for some families, it's also how can you go from 2 cars to 1 car? So much financial benefit if you're able to navigate your way down from 2 cars to 1 car. But then you need to figure out what are the solutions, how do you piece things together? And it really is like a puzzle when you look at bus schedules, when you look at bikes, when you look at, you know, what's walkable, what's carpool, like all of those different pieces fit together in order to make it possible for folks.
Thanks for sharing. And could I ask Alicia a very quick question? And Jamie, then I'll let you get to your comment. But I was curious if CarShare has bike racks on any of their cars, or if that's a conversation for the future.
Yeah, we actually do. A good number of our vehicles have bike racks in the summer, and then we put ski racks in the winter. We switch them out. So yeah, they're there to, you know, put your bike on. And I was gonna say for John, like, you know, if you put your bike on the bus, you bus up to town, bike into Old Spokes home, and then if you need a car during the day, we have an electric vehicle parked behind your office that, you know, you could use for like those errands or getting to a meeting, you know. So that's what I feel like, those connections like are super powerful. And I'm a multimodal person, like daily. Like I'm walking somewhere, I might jump on, well, I used to jump on a bike share bike, you know, maybe, or like ride my bike up one way and then get on a bus for something else, or use car share midday. So I'm always kind of switching modes throughout the day. But yeah.
So I just wanted to hop in and mention, you know, echo what John and Alicia are saying, but also throw out another resource, because I know that there are a lot of folks from Northwest Vermont who might not have access to all of these options. They, you know, biking and busing, sure, not car share yet, hopefully, but the state of Vermont does offer a program called Guaranteed Ride Home. So if folks are using the bus, or you know, if you say you get to the bus stop and you're on your bike and there's no space on the bike rack and you have to, you know, sort of chain it up, they have a Guaranteed Ride Home program, which would allow somebody that peace of mind that if they didn't have another option, they would reimburse for cab fare up to a certain percentage annually. So it's just one more layer. I know I said that earlier about car share, like folks come into Burlington, car share is a way for them to get around, biking is a way for them to get around, and that gives peace of mind. The Guaranteed Ride Home program would give that peace of mind to folks outside of the Burlington area.
And I believe we've been also part of that Guaranteed Ride Home. So in addition to being able to take a taxi cab, if someone's a car share membership, they could be eligible up to a certain amount for reimbursement with a car share car. So anyway, just to like put that in there too.
Great. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't heard of the Guaranteed Ride. Is that through GMT or?
It's through Vermont Agency of Transportation. So it's on their website, connectingcommuters.org, which has lots of information about multimodal options across the state. So they have a trip planner that would allow you to sort of connect yourself across the state if you're not wanting to go to everybody's individual websites and figure out how to use those services. And to John's point about car ownership, I think APTA, the American Public Transit Association, in 2019 released a statistic that switching your mode of transportation from cars can save up to $816 a month. And that was in 2019. And we all know that the pandemic made everything more expensive. Gas is more expensive. Car ownership is more expensive. So just to put that in perspective, I think the $10,000 a year from AAA might be definitely understating.
Yeah, thank you. That leads very nicely into my next question, which was, I know that you probably all have a lot of statistics and background research. I wonder if you could speak to what you feel like someone would save coming to your program, both in costs and also just in being greener. If you could speak to maybe what it would cost to get somebody onto a bike, but what they would, save by by not having their own car, by not having to get a car loan.
Yeah, I think I've outlined this a little bit, but like the truth is you can walk into Old Spokes Home and get a great bike for, especially through our Everybody Bikes program, for $200, $300. If you don't qualify for that program, you can still get a great bike at any bike shop or maybe out on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. Even if you're spending, $700 or $800 on a bike, that bike is going to need minimal maintenance. So relative to the initial cost of a car, it's really night and day. And then I guess I like to think of the other side of the ledger too, which is health. Let's think about health. Like we spend a lot of time sitting these days, and when you're the unique thing about a bicycle is that the passenger is also the motor. So you get out there, you get your heart pumping a little bit. There's some health benefits for doing that. I think there are some community benefits, and this really applies to walking. I think it applies to riding the bus too, but also to riding a bike, which is when you bike, you are part of your community. You are engaging people. You're seeing neighbors. You're just out and about in a different way than when you are in a car, and you tend to isolate yourself when you're in a car. So not only are there financial benefits in terms of the low cost of ownership and the low cost of miles traveled, particularly with gas prices the way they are right now, but there really are a set of benefits in terms of those health and just the joy of getting onto a bike and cruising around and being a part of your neighborhood and your community.
In terms of the environmental benefit, the state of Vermont, I think, has released statistics that greenhouse gas emissions, nearly 50% from the state of Vermont are from the transportation sector. So folks in their personal vehicles. So, the obvious benefits to biking, there are no emissions really. And you can't go wrong with any of the options. Anytime there's a solution to getting folks out of their own personal vehicle with one person, either, going electric, car sharing, carpooling, busing, it's going to have a huge environmental benefit.
So I actually, I ran some numbers on this because when people purchase a vehicle through the program, we have to take down the purchase order. And if they trade in a vehicle, we capture the VIN number. And last year I ran all of the VIN numbers through a database online that looks up the previous inspections. So you get average miles per year. So I did this when we had maybe about a third of the number of incentives delivered that we do now. So it's a little less. But on average, for folks who traded in an internal combustion engine for a hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or all-electric vehicle, they went from spending about $1,300 a year on gas. And I did adjust this. I adjusted this for the most up-to-date gas prices. Driving through Williston yesterday, I saw $4.54, which is less than what it was, but still terrible. So folks were spending on average $1,300 a year driving around their gas guzzler. And by switching to a mileage smart car, we're able to drop that by $852 on average. So we're helping folks save. And I know, Jamie, you mentioned that on average, it costs that much just a month on average. So it isn't as much as we need it to be. But for folks who are living paycheck to paycheck, getting that amount back is huge. And I also did calculate the emissions on this. So with the cars that they had before Mileage Smart, that was approximately 3.2 tons of emissions, and we have brought it down to 1.6 tons. So that was just with 75 folks who had gone through, and now we're almost at 400. And I'm well overdue to run the numbers again, and I'm excited to see what the change is.
Great. And I'll just jump in to give some perspective for like around car sharing. So, we often help households shift from 2 cars to 1 or go car free entirely. And, if the number of like 10,000 a year to own a car, if that's kind of like, what AAA is saying for an active household, if they're spending like 1,200 to 2,000 a year on car share, they would be like a super active member. So, our members are spending, like $100 to $200 a month to have access to a car for what they need. So it's quite affordable. And, a lot of the people that join are also, if they did own a vehicle previously, their driving is decreasing by sometimes as much as half. Just by the act of being more mindful about when you really need to get in a car and drive. And when you're paying for it up front, you tend to kind of like decide to jump on your bike or take the bus instead, or walk to that thing that you would have if your car was sitting parked in your driveway, you would have just jumped in and drive, So I think that the nature of car sharing is that people tend to drive significantly less, but also spend it's night and day between car ownership versus car sharing. So that's a huge incentive for people to kind of make that shift. But still, and as we kind of add vehicles, and we have 22 now, we're continuing to expand that convenience of having, now I have a vehicle that's like, a 2-minute walk from my house. And so it's like, it's still convenient, and I can, use it when I need to, but I don't have to have it parked in my driveway, and paying paying for insurance and paying for all of those fixed costs. So, so that's some comparison for car sharing.
Great. Thank you all for that context. It's kind of mind-blowing to hear it all so plainly put. At this point, we're going to move into some prepared questions for each of your individual organizations or yourselves. And we see a lot of really great questions coming into the chat. So we will get to those in just a few minutes, but a few more for our panelists from Jen and I. So John, we're going to start with you. You've already talked a good deal about some of the ways you incentivize people to get into biking, but we'd love to hear a little bit more of if someone was trying to make bike commuting their primary mode of commuting, what steps would they have to take, and what resources are recommended to getting them started at a bare minimum?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's multifaceted. I think, we think a lot about the bicycle itself. What type of bicycle? Is it a dependable bike? Is it relatively, let's say, easy to operate? If someone intends to be an all-weather commuter, does the bike, one of the things that makes a bike really useful is fenders, right? Fenders sort of keep the road splatter from soaking the rider. It's amazing how much nicer a bike is with fenders when you're riding in the rain or in the slush. does that commuter want to carry stuff to and from work, and how do they want to do it? Sometimes it's as simple as just putting on a backpack, but sometimes it's actually really nice to let the bike carry the load instead of your body. So you get a rack on that bike, and you get a special pannier to go on that rack, and that can be a really nice addition. I think here's a couple other things that we like to think with people about. Some is maybe your attire, right? We say, and I know we'll get to this a little more, but like in Vermont, we say there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad gear, right? And so that really can apply to dressing well for the conditions. Or, my coworker and I were talking about, because, it'll come as no surprise, we're pretty religious about riding to and from the shop here, all of us who work here. And like my coworker was sharing the story of another person she used to work with who kept that extra set of clothes in the filing cabinet at the office, such that when they had that soggy ride or that, maybe I shouldn't throw shade, but when that bus drives by and there's that huge splash, it's so nice to be able to put on dry socks and dry clothes when you get to the office. So like planning for those eventualities is also can be helpful for folks. And then finally, I would say, well, two other things. One is a little bit of confidence in terms of if there's a mechanical issue, if there's a flat tire, how do you address that? What does that look like? It's not a crisis. Like a flat tire is typically a 10-minute delay. Some of that, though, means some understanding on the employer side of things, such that they know that that's a possibility and they're understanding about that. Employers often, in a subsidized way, provide parking for their employees, right? Every one of those parking spots has major cost to it. And so there are real benefits for employers for having employees bike to work, real financial benefits. And hopefully part of that is some leeway for eventualities like flats. I mean, it's no different than folks who drive to work and experience mechanical issues. It can happen to all of us. I guess the other thing I would mention is route choice. The reality is another barrier for people in terms of getting on bikes is feeling safe riding in the same roadway with cars and trucks and buses. And so, and route choice is one of those things that we bring some expertise in. Other partners like Local Motion have expertise around really thinking about, and it's not just choosing a good route that's more safe, it's also some confidence about how to ride safely on the road. And we're always eager to work with folks on both of those fronts. When I bike from here up to the hospital, I have one choice, which is to go a long way. I'm forgetting the name of the road, but the truth is it gets narrow and people have a hard time passing me on those roads. And so I've made a different choice, which is to head down a particular road and head up Loomis because it just feels safer. Those are the things that are learned over time. Or sometimes it's helpful to have someone who has a little more expertise think with folks about how to choose the safest route to get to work or wherever it is they're going.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. My question is for Samantha. And it was a question that actually just came up on the chat. Some people are worried that how are they going to charge their car? What happens with electric cars? If you could just share a little bit on how someone could think about charging their hybrid plug-in or their electric car, if that's a worry to them when they think about switching to that.
Absolutely. This is hands down the most common question and concern that folks have when they consider purchasing an EV, and even folks who already have an EV. They're still trying to figure this out. So for folks who cannot access a public charger, it's not on their route, the biggest thing I would suggest, and unfortunately it's not an immediate fix, but as I had mentioned, if you have to go into the office every day, reaching out to your employer and making sure that they're aware of the rebate available to them. I don't know off the top of my head, and I really should, what that rebate is. But I do know that so many employers have folks who want EVs, and you'll see for places that do install chargers, it just encourages people to switch to EVs. So that is one step that can be taken. There are additionally rebates available to install home chargers. That is if you own your home and it is a single family home. And I think there are some utility providers that will even just give you a free charger. It depends. You'll have to check with them. Some is a percentage of the cost, some is a flat rate, and then sometimes it's free. And then to the question that came into the chat, people who live in an apartment complex or something similar, I think that it will be available to landlords. I don't know if it's gotten started yet, but money has been allocated to provide a rebate to landlords and property owners to install chargers in their multi-unit buildings. TBD to see how that will work, especially for places that don't offer a parking space for every unit or multiple parking spaces, but it's happening. The unfortunate truth, and I'm going to be honest, it's happening much slower than it needs to. I think if the goal is to have every person who really needs a car to transition to electric, we needed that infrastructure to already be there. And that's just not the case. So it is happening. It's just at a snail's pace. If you have an EV, if you really just, you want to make the change, you still don't know where you're going to charge, there are a lot of apps that you can find public charging locations at. I have heard that the different apps kind of vary on their usability. And of course, if you live in a rural area and you don't have service, that is something to take into consideration as well. But I think if you have all of the apps and you can kind of create a patchwork map of the state, I think one thing to take into account, and I'm not trying to scare people away from EVs at all, but being prepared is a huge thing, and different EVs use different chargers, and some charging locations only offer a charger for one type of EV. And that can be really difficult, especially if you don't have an app and you just drive to the charger and your car is out of juice, but you need to plug it in and you can't. So making sure that you do your research and see what is actually there, beyond just, is there a charger there, but what type and is it compatible? And potentially purchasing a converter for your car to plug into the other types of plugs. But yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful question, and I'm sorry, my answer is not, it's not a bright and shiny thing, but yeah, slowly it will become much easier just down the road.
Thanks for sharing, Samantha.
Yeah, thank you.
The reality is important to be aware of. So Jamie, our next question is for you, and we'd love to hear how GMT is making public transportation more available and accessible. I know you already began speaking about this.
Yeah, one way is through microtransit systems. So in January of 2021, GMT launched a program in Montpelier called My Ride. It's essentially an on-demand public transportation service. So for folks who need to get to work at a specific time or to an appointment at a specific time, they're not relying on a fixed route bus schedule, which, this service replaced 3 bus lines that were hourly service. So if somebody missed the first bus, they had an hour until the next bus was going to pass them by. With My Ride, folks are able to use an app on their phone or call GMT or book through our customer service reps at our transit centers. A trip, anywhere from 7 o'clock in the morning till 6 p.m. at night, up to 4 weeks in advance. So, if folks have medical appointments or fixed schedules, they can go in and they can book all those pre-booked rides for 4 weeks at a time. So that's one way. We were talking a little bit before everybody came into the room before this session started about, there are trade-offs to that makes transportation accessible for folks who didn't like that model, didn't like a fixed route service that couldn't work for them. It wasn't convenient. But there are trade-offs to folks who have limited access to technology. So we're trying to work on a program for accessibility phones. So putting phone locations or stations in specific areas for, if somebody doesn't have a cell phone, they can just go to this public phone that would ring directly through to GMT. So folks would be able to book their trip that way. So that's one way. The other way is through technology. I've said this, I think, a handful of times today, but people in their individual cars, they have the peace of mind that they can get where they need to go. So we've tried to put technology pieces in place that would allow people to track the bus in real time. So they know that if they're standing at a bus stop, they can see the buses coming their way. They don't have to wonder. And we have been working a lot over the last 2 years with our technology partners to improve the reliability of that, especially in downtown Burlington, where we have several buses that sort of follow each other around in the downtown transit area. We've made that a lot easier and cleaner, so folks have some ability to see in real time where their vehicles are. The map on our homepage does the same thing. If you go to ridegmt.com, we have a map. You can see the buses travel along on the route of our system map. And in other areas, and when we did have fares, we were putting digital fare payment and things like that into place, just to make some of those barriers to riding transportation, allow people to overcome those barriers.
Great, thank you for that. And Alicia, one question for you. Do you have plans to expand car share into other areas? And what can someone listening do to advocate for that in their own town?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one we get asked a lot. I would say this week we had folks from South Burlington, Essex, Winooski, all kind of asking, what are the plans? We want you here. And so the challenge for us is that as a nonprofit, we need our vehicles are expensive. The technology we're using is expensive. And so we need the cars to cover their cost. So our current model, like in Burlington, even being able to expand to like the new North End is still a goal. We're not quite there yet, because to have enough support from the community and enough use. New North End kind of isn't quite there yet. So and Winooski, we were in Winooski, and it's a goal to kind of get back there someday. We had to kind of close that pod. So we have piloted some other locations. We did a Montpelier pilot for 2 years, and again, there was just not quite enough use to sustain the service. However, our conversations right now is working with the state to think about, okay, so our current model is set up in this way, but maybe there needs to be kind of a new model of car sharing that has kind of state support or kind of ongoing subsidy to make it actually feasible, because on its own, it may not be able to sustain itself because there's not enough people, but it still has value as a service. And so figuring out whether that's partnering with, in the past, we partnered with developers that want to have a vehicle on site, and they're willing to kind of help provide some of the financial support to cover the gap that exists between what people are using and the revenue that's generated by that use, and what the car costs to kind of own and operate and sustain. So we have some of those partnerships in Burlington to make certain locations work. And, you know, I think we're exploring with the state and with other partners about like what different models could we explore. And if it's not CarShare Vermont starting it, how do we support other community groups that are interested in car sharing to kind of, you know, provide them with the expertise and support to encourage that grassroots development of like car sharing startups in other places. So, you know, we definitely, you know, see ourselves growing in Burlington and again, hopefully Winooski and, you know, and other kind of maybe communities around our core operating area, but and then supporting kind of like new models and new partnerships that might bring car sharing in different forms to other more rural areas where it's going to require just a different measure of success, you know, or like, you know, and it will require kind of some ongoing support financially to make it work. So it's exciting because we're, you know, we're starting to have those conversations and think about kind of how we can support that moving forward, and while kind of still maintaining our core operations here where we have a lot of opportunity for growth just within our current operating area and really serving more households. So we have about 1,000 members sharing our 22 vehicles. We hope to continue to grow that, and we think that we have a lot more opportunity to add locations within our current service area and support more folks kind of transitioning away from car ownership into these other ways of getting around. So yeah, so we're you know, we're working on it for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. I think this is a good time to move into some of the questions that have come through the chat and to start to open it to other questions that might be on your mind. Lori had presented a question early on when John was introducing himself, and it goes right on line with what Alicia was saying. She was curious to hear if you're familiar with other similar programs, like what Old Spokes Home offers, if there are other programs around the state, like Everybody Bikes, acknowledging that the rail trail is a real big driver of bike transportation. So do you know of other programs around the state? And Lori, if you want to chime in, feel free to let us know where you are.
I can take a crack at that. We actually are in the informal stages of trying to develop what I'm calling the Vermont Bike Access Network, because there are a few other nonprofits around Vermont that do very similar work as Old Spokes Home. The nodes of that right now are in Bellows Falls. There's actually the community, I think they're called maybe the Community Bike Project in Bellows Falls. In Montpelier, there's a bike co-op called Free Ride. In St. Johnsbury, it actually used to be in Lyndonville, but I think it's now in St. Jay. There's something called St. Johnsbury Link, I think. And then there's us here at Old Spokes Home. And then new, coming online sometime soon, there's a group down in Bennington that's calling themselves The Hub that's also trying to follow the same model. So, you know, if I think like 5 years out, I have this aspiration that we essentially have a net that covers Vermont, and it's a two-way net. On one hand, what we want to do is catch all of those bikes that people no longer need, and we're trying to catch them before they get to the landfill and the scrap heap, because a lot of those bikes are really useful objects and can be fixed up and returned back out into the community. And then it's also a net in that when there's people out there who need bikes, that net is there to serve those folks and get those bikes into people's hands, essentially. So I would say stay tuned for more on that. But for now, that's a general sense of where those nodes are. You know, the nice thing about Old Spokes Home, and I think some of those other partners, is we actually, I don't have limitations geographically in terms of the Everybody Bikes program. I actually remember I used to work for Congressman Welsh as a caseworker. I remember calling Old Spokes Home at the time. It was then Bike Recycle Vermont. There was a veteran in White River Junction who needed a bike, and like they were responsive to that need. The truth is, if someone else can solve the transportation issue of like getting the bike to that person, often we actually can partner, or we can connect you with some other partner like the others I've listed to make that happen. So we don't want geography to be a limitation in terms of getting people access to bikes.
Thanks for sharing, John, and great question, Lori. We had one other question come through from Connie. Connie, would you like to present your question, or would you rather I read it? Be nice to hear another voice, maybe.
Hey, oh, thanks, Rachel. Yeah, I think all of you think about this probably all the time, but it's just my point with just yesterday, I spoke with an employer who's you know, the demographic of their employees in this manufacturing company is, you know, really working class, like work a farm and come in, and trucks are really important and part of, like, there's deep cultural value around like what it means to financially have a vehicle, and but also like mobility, economic mobility, like cars and trucks in rural Vermont are so sort of central in that thinking. And then I also recognize sometimes when I think about green transportation, often in my mind, it's felt like sort of this other thing, or this thing that really is a choice or a privilege that doesn't always account for the choice that a lot of people I'm working with make, and that it sort of others them. You know, when we talk about gas guzzlers, that is a kind of a turnoff, right? Because I think it sort of others people and it kind of makes them feel bad for the choice that they're making, whether they're making it because it's just the vehicle they have available to them, or the vehicle that meets their needs right now. So I guess my question really is about all of these great programs and thinking about the experience of the worker that I'm working with that is so dependent on that vehicle. And I say trucks, but it could be any gas vehicle. You know, I don't think the message about green transportation has really included their experience or voice. And I wonder if there's some thought to how do we create opportunity for all of these programs to be seen by those workers that Working Bridges is serving in workplaces in our most rural communities. And so, because I think some of the things I think John had said about like the cost of vehicles, like cost definitely is something people pay attention to, right? I get that. But then I also wonder if, you know, that idea of like the bigger, the better, right? Well, what about, at what point can we take that and, you know, sort of say like, yeah, I have my truck, the greener, the better, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, so the point of like having e-trucks available, could we like, yeah, that's a pretty new technology probably, and probably really expensive too. So I'm not suggesting we would do that, but that message might somehow reach someone who's really into what it means culturally to have a truck in our rural state. Because I just, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess the question really is around where do you see messaging in your programs to reach that population, or marketing strategies as a collective are there? Because that's one thing where like there are so many great programs, and it would be great to be able to help people that we're working with connect with them, but from that culturally relevant and inclusive place where the experience and choice and voice of the working Vermonter is really, you know, that we are inclusive, that like the choice you have now isn't bad. You're not bad for driving a truck. I think that we want to, you know, meet people where they are in that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about what you want to do with your program to better bring that voice and experience forward in the programming.
Can I take a stab at this? I love this question and I've been dying to answer it. I think what's important to remember is that we're not going to change everybody's mind about vehicle ownership. But a lot of our programs, a lot of the opportunity to expand programs relies on funding, regional funding, state funding, and that funding requires support. And so we might not be able to get folks out of their vehicles. We might be able to, you know, get somebody to start thinking about an electric truck. But honestly, it's about garnering the community support to expand these programs. You know, I'm often asked for, what can we do to get more bus lines, more transportation service? That's a huge need for so many people. And I think, our marketing and some of these programs should focus on just getting that community support to get these regional funding models in place to be able to expand these programs for folks who need them most. And not, there's the term greenwashing, not greenwashing folks and making them feel like their choice to have a vehicle is bad, but getting them to recognize that by supporting all of these programs, they can still make a difference. They can still have, people can still expand, more people can have bus service. It might even open up opportunities for, bus service or car share service or biking or, in their area, if that's not available to them in the most rural parts of Vermont. So I don't know if anybody wants to add to that.
Yeah, so through Mileage Smart and Drive Electric as well, we partner with dealers across the state. And a huge piece of the puzzle is the message that dealers put out to their customers. And what you see in the NEK and Southern Vermont are, massive ads, not physically, but massive ad pushes for big, shiny new trucks, because that is the culture. And I agree with Jamie, we can't expect people to flip like that, especially for folks who really do rely on that type of vehicle for their work or for what they do around their house. So while there are electric trucks becoming more available, they're like $60,000, $70,000 and up. And so what we've done in Mileage Smart, and I know I said Drive Electric, but I believe it's Efficiency Vermont. We work with dealers to get them to market for our programs, and Efficiency Vermont actually does have an incentive program for dealers. They get money to market for EVs and plug-in hybrids, and actually salespeople, they get a few $100s if they sell an EV to a customer. So I think a really good example of this is Lamoille Valley Ford. When you think of that area, you think big trucks, but I believe they are one of the most prominent new EV dealers in the state as well. And they've done a really good job of balancing that and pushing the message out. I think that there needs to be maybe more of an organized effort to get to dealers, because that's when someone thinks I need a car, that's the place that they go. So if there was a more organized effort to get information out, I think that's a really key piece of the puzzle.
Thanks, Jamie and Samantha. I think that's an important part, because I recognize electric vehicles won't be for everyone, right? Like the dairy farmer that needs that truck, they're going to use it, right? It makes sense. And then I do think there's probably a role that employers could take in this more active role. And but I do think like a more coordinated way of sharing these resources with employees is something that's needed, because this is new, right? This is really a new resource, lots of different incentives for both employers and individuals. We focus on workers, but workers need transportation to work, right? So often working with people who don't have remote access available in their job function, transportation and transportation costs are still required for that person earning $15 an hour and showing up to a workplace to do their job. Childcare too. So we think of costs, for us in remote job functions, look at us, maybe we can not have a transportation cost. So I'd love to think about it as a an infrastructure need and a way of like making sure workers can, essential workers can have a pathway to good transportation and green transportation. But I think right now it feels like so many, like there are lots of different pieces. And I know, I mean, I'm looking at Haley, but as a resource coordinator, trying to present different transportation options, it gets confusing really fast and people don't have bandwidth to go further. So it's almost like, how can we create a way of like making this really bite-sized, easy to navigate, 1, 2, 3, and I'm in a new vehicle, right? Like just somehow like get me the keys, like help me get the keys so that I can make it so darn easy and that I don't even have to think about it. Right. So keep us, I mean, as far as I'm thinking about resource coordinators working with workers, but if there are ways we can share the message that will help that like move people into this option and help people understand it, let us know.
I love that there's this coordinated discussion with people, because one of our last questions was, are you optimistic about, moving forward into getting more people to use electric vehicles or to use alternative transportation than owning a single vehicle? And how can we do that, and how can we do it faster? And already in the last 5 minutes, I've heard a lot of ideas. Put more on the employer. Why not an employer maybe have an electric truck that everybody can use, or have ways to get people to charge their electric vehicles at their place, and also just the idea of targeting the dealership, where that kind of influence of what kind of vehicle you get comes from. So I think these are all really great ideas. And I see that Eric has his hand up.
Oh, hey, yeah, thanks, Jen. I just wanted to jump in. I think that's going to be a huge piece, having the ability to charge at work, so getting charging stations in. But what I really wanted to speak to was the culture of the big truck. And here in the Northeast Kingdom, obviously, that's the cowboy Cadillac is what they used to call it back where I used to live out west. So I don't, but that's the default vehicle. The Ford Lightnings are sold out. You can't find, which is the Ford electric truck. You can't find one if you want one. And I think it's just, we're at the forefront. So as more manufacturers come online with their electric trucks, as more trucks get into the used market, they're going to become more affordable. But I think a huge part of it is more peer-to-peer. When dairy farmer Bob pulls up in his Lightning and his neighbor sees it and he sees how fast it is and how cool it is and how efficient it is and how he's not spending $150 at the gas pump, it's going to spread just organically.
Eric, this is why I tell John I want e-bikes for our whole team, so we can just show up in e-bikes. Like that is exactly, John, I'm coming after you. I want an e-bike. Like I keep like thinking.
Honey, I'm not biking to St. Albans.
Haley, it can happen. No, I mean, I think you're right on, Eric. There is something to be said about relationships, in Vermont, and just the way people like to make their decisions. I know I've got good info because Eric knows this and I've been able to connect about this. I see him doing it and I feel good about that. So so as we're thinking about this changing field, how are we integrating relationships into this work? And that's that would be really cool. Anyway, I'm gonna ride myself over to Old Spokes now. See you later, John.
Come on over.
I'm coming in late. Is there, do I have room to ask for a question fast?
Go ahead.
Yes, is that okay? I was hoping, I'm looking into getting what kind of incentives are there? I don't know, maybe you already did this, and if you did, can someone send it to me? But I know there's a Miles Smart program. Is there anything else I'm looking into getting a hybrid car, and like what kind of things? Oh, because they are more expensive. And I heard you just saying how hopefully they'll be less, but like, is there anything that I'm missing other than the Miles Smart program?
If you're interested in a conventional hybrid, so it doesn't have any plug-in, as far as I'm aware, Mileage Smart is the only program. If you're considering a used plug-in hybrid, then the utilities do offer incentives for that. The incentives are a little bit less than what you would get for an all-electric vehicle, though.
Thank you.
Sam, I'll just say for the sake of time that we're going to be sending an email at the end of this session that will contain a video link as well as lots of great resources that were shared today. So you can watch the video, and then I'll also make sure to include links to each of our panelists' websites. And if our panelists are open to sending me any additional resources you'd like shared out, if you get that over to me by early afternoon, I'll put it in an email by the end of today. And Sam, I bet that will give you a lot of really great information.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I am noticing we are almost at the 11:30 mark. We've had a really great conversation today. If there are additional questions that come up, you're going to have contact information for our panelists if they give me the go-ahead to share their information. And I see this as the start of a really important conversation. So I appreciate everyone joining us today. Jen, I'd like to pass it over to you to give us some final remarks. But from my end, thank you once more, and keep an eye out for an email later today.
Great. Thanks, Rachel, for putting this all together on the technology side and suggesting it. And thank you to everybody who spoke and everybody who joined us. Again, greensavingsmart.org is the website for my program. You can get to coaches through all of the community action agencies. And if anybody has any suggestions about how we can keep this conversation going and keep the conversation throughout all of us, my email is jmyers@cvoeo.org, and I would love to find a way to continue these conversations and bring in more people from around the community, because I think it is very important that we address everyone in this area, and that is how you get the word out and get more people switching to green transportation. So thank you again very much.
Thanks all. Bye.
Enjoy your day.